Hey, how's it going, guys? This is going to be my video on how to install a Bodyguard A2L Front Bumper on a 2018 GMC Sierra Denali. So what we have here is pretty much everything that comes in the kit, if you want to call it that. You get a bumper, obviously, and then you have all these inserts, which all go together and make up the actual shapes and hold in the cubes and light bars that go into this bumper, which are right here. Bodyguard includes a bunch of hardware, and they actually give you a lot of extras, which is pretty nice, as well as there are two mounting plates, which I've already put on for the bumper itself. It uses the factory mounting locations, as well as some of the factory hardware, so make sure when you take your old bumper off that you don't actually throw out any of the hardware, because you won't know what you need until you actually use it. One of the only complaints I have about this, as I've already actually had it on my truck for close to a few months, is that when I put it on the first time, the instruction manual is not very good. It's a great product, but the instructions just aren't that great. There's no torque specs or anything like that, as well as I personally just found it rather confusing when I was going through them, given that there's no real pictures, as well as it was kind of hard to find any videos that anybody's made on installing these things, and there's very few videos of people with them actually on their trucks. What I did was I actually went on the website, and that's where I found this, but I tried to click through some of the other models, like looking at Fords and Dodges, to see if any of the other instruction manuals were any better, just to give me a general idea, but for the most part they were all about the same. But I'm going to walk you guys through it. It's really not that complicated, and hopefully this helps somebody down the line. So stay tuned. I'm going to cut around in this video just because I'm going to be doing stuff and I don't want to waste your time having you watch me tighten bolts and such, but I'll make sure that I show you everything. Okay, so the very first steps with this, in my opinion, would be you're going to want to put on the actual plates that will hold the bumper on. As you can see, I've already done it. But I'll show you where the bolts are, and for reference, these are the bolts that we're going to be using. The instruction manual calls them teardrop bolts. I wasn't really sure what they were when I was looking through all of this here, but what I figured out was that these seem to work because you insert them, and because it'd be pretty hard to get a wrench up inside to hold this in place, this teardrop, I guess you want to call it, locks up against the frame, and that therefore lets you tighten it. So as you can see, if we go underneath here, hopefully we can get this to focus. We've got one, two, a third one up here, and then this fourth guy right here will actually go through this hole, and then it will lock into the bumper itself. So really only three of these actually secure it to the frame. It's the same on this side as well. You've got one, two, three securing it to the frame, and you kind of get them into place by putting them up through here or putting them up through there, and then just cinching them down. Like they said, there's no torque spec. I kind of just tried to gauge it as best as I could and tighten them down like I don't want this thing falling off. So that would be what I would say is the first step, is to put these two plates on. Then I think one of the next steps that's really important is to actually do your wiring prep. For me, since I already mentioned, I've put this on and off. Now this is probably my third or fourth time, just because I had it on and it wasn't painted, and then I had to take it off to get it painted, and then I had to put it back on so I could drive around. And now we're finally getting back to putting all of the light bars and everything back in. I think it's really easy if you just run your wiring first. It'll save you a little bit of headache in the end. As I mentioned, you're gonna have, depending on what model you get or how you configure it, right here there's gonna be two 30-inch light bars, and then two cubes and two cubes. So totally you've got like 6 lighting elements, if you want to call it that. And that would be my next step. So first step is going to be putting on the brackets. Second step would be prepping your lighting. Okay guys, so after you have put on the mounting plates and done your wiring, the next step is going to be actually setting up the cubes in the bumper itself right there. So what you're going to need to do is you have two inserts, which are meant for your cubes right here, and then on the back side you have where they actually attach. You have a lot of play with how you can actually aim these, etc. What I like to do is kind of just aim them square, because I think that is the best look for it. So all you're gonna do is, I've already set up my brackets on my rigid cubes, but if you hadn't done that, first you would want to set those up, and then next you would want to, basically all you're gonna do is just get them on and in place, and then I would tighten it down first, just so that you don't have to deal with it falling off, and then after it's like hand tight, you can move it around and try and get it set to where you would like to see it go. So as you can see right now, just how it's set up, that it's sort of sticking out and it's not flush. So what I would like is for it to be flush, just because I think it's a cleaner look if they're not sticking out. As well as I want to try and keep an equal amount of space on each side, because I have yellow, like fog light-esque color caps to put over these things, because I'm going to try and use them as my replacement fog lights due to the fact that I lost my factory fog lights. So now that's in position, and then you're going to do one more, same deal, just on the other side, and you will repeat the process for this side, which would be your left side insert, and this is your right side insert. Okay, so now that those are all installed, as you can see, I'm actually going to try and run this yellowy orange housing over them to see if it will dim it down at all, because I actually already have been pulled over once for using these little cubes on the road. I guess they're just a little bit too bright, which I've kind of expected, but figured, hey, I'd give it a shot. I think potentially using the orange yellow cover as well as just running one set on will make a big difference. So what I have bought is I've actually bought an adapter for the factory wiring harness that allows me to run the two most outside cubes that have the yellow housing from the fog light switch in my truck. Now, something you also have to remember and consider with that is that if you turn your brights on, it's going to turn those off. So originally what I was doing was I was running them off of a switch, which allowed them to all stay on regardless of whether my brights were on or not. But now, if I have them on and my regular headlights and switch to my brights, it's immediately going to turn those off. So it's just something that's food for thought. Okay guys, so the next step of this is going to be to actually prep the bumper for your inserts and your cover plate. What you're going to need is these little things that they do include. They allow you to screw in your little bolts with a hex head, and they grab these and tighten. Now the center has these very same little square cutouts, but the two sides are a little bit different, because this plate actually goes up flush against the inside of this. So what you do is you put these guys, you need 4 of them for this one. Now this could be GM model specific, or it could be the way Bodyguard does all their bumpers. Truthfully, I do not know. I would imagine they're all roughly the same. So as you can see on the insert, we actually have 4 of these squares, and then those are going to line up with 1, 2, 3, 4 corners, but then you also have 2 more. So you're going to put 2 of these into the actual bumper, and then the other 4 are going to go into the insert. And that will allow this to go right here and snug everything up and hold it in place. So what I think is the easiest way to actually put these guys in is, what you're going to want to do is have a flathead screwdriver and have your piece. Put one side into place, so hook one side on, then take your flathead and just give the other side a gentle little push, and then it'll snap right into place easily and it'll stay in place. And you're going to do the same for the 4 corners, and if you didn't already put those 2 in at this point, you would put those 2 in. Now in the center, every single spot gets these put onto the actual bumper itself, but you would do the same thing on the other side. The middle 2 would get put into the bumper itself, and then the other 4 corners would get put into your insert. Okay guys, so once you actually have the bumper all prepped and ready, what your next step is going to be is to actually screw in the inserts and the front plate. So this can be a little bit tricky just because you need to work from both behind and in front of the bumper, but if you take your time and just be a little bit patient, because it can be difficult, you'll get it. So what I try and do is line up one, line up the other. If you can get it started with your fingers, that'd be perfect. So there's one, and then you gotta get the other corner,
Might take some fiddling a little bit, but you'll get it. And then I take my drill on the lowest setting and just get them in there. See, I get that one. So if you're having trouble, you can always look from behind, and then you can get it in. And once you have 2 of them in, the rest are really easy because it's now being held in place. So you'll do the same thing in each of the spots it's missing. And then I put them in loose. That way, as you can see, this moves around a little bit. So if you have them in there loose, then you can get it to a spot where you like it, and then you can tighten everything down. Okay guys, so as I mentioned earlier, this bumper does incorporate your parking sensors. So what you have to do is you have to actually remove your parking sensors from your old bumper, which isn't too tricky to do. What you have to do is, here's one of them. And what I did was when I took them out, I labeled them just so that I wasn't sure if it actually mattered, but I was gonna put them back in the same exact places. So if you, when you're looking at it from behind the bumper, you'll see this. You want to pull up on these 2 tabs, and that will let you actually slide the centerpiece out just like that. And there's the actual sensor, and then this is the housing. And then to reinstall it, what I found was that there are actually little grooves here, but they do not actually correctly correspond to the grooves on these guys. So you kind of have to just shove them in, and there's little tabs that will grab and hold it into place. So you can kind of line 1 or 2 of them up, but there you go. That's that. You get it clicked into place, and then you go around the back side of things, and you're going to push the sensor back and up into place from behind the bumper. And this is a lot easier to do when the bumper is not actually on the vehicle. If it's on the vehicle, it's going to be really tricky. So you do that there, and then you do the exact same thing on the driver's side. So same deal. You pull the tabs and push the sensor out the middle. Then you have your insert, and what you're going to want to do is slide that right into place. Clip in, make sure it's in there good, and same deal. Reach up from behind and insert your sensor. Like I said, you definitely want to do this when it's off the vehicle, because it's much harder to do if you're trying to do this when it's on. So you just then push your sensor back in from the back, make sure everything's clipped in good, and there you go, good to go. So that's how you install your 2 parking sensors on the furthest spot. The other sensors will be installed later using these pieces, which go on top of the middle insert, which I'm going to work on after we put this thing on the truck. Okay guys, so now we're actually we're ready at the point where we can mount this thing onto the actual truck. This I would definitely recommend having 2 people for, as this thing is pretty darn heavy. I did it by myself, and I'm gonna have to do it again by myself today. What I did was I kind of snuck a chair under here. I'll sit one side onto the chair and then line the other side up. So as you can see, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes here, which actually do correspond to 5 holes inside of here. Now these top 4 on both sides use the factory bolts, which I mentioned earlier. So these are the factory bolts it's going to use. You do not want to throw these guys away, otherwise I'm not really sure what you would do. So basically all you do, lift the bumper up into place, get at least 1 bolt in on each side, then you can let the weight of it sit on those 2 and get the rest of your bolts into place. The bottom bolt on each side is going to use those teardrop bolts we talked about earlier. So what you'll do is once the bumper's on, then you'll insert this up from the bottom here, get it out through here, and then use the washer and nut through the actual bumper itself. And I'll show you guys this once we get it up. Okay, so now I've got the bumper up on the truck. It's just being held on by 1, 2 bolts pretty loosely, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the other 6 of these, and we're going to put them into place, and then we'll use the teardrops after that. So you've got all these factory spots. I would just get them. I always like to thread stuff in by hand to start, because as you can see, this guy right here is a perfect example. Giving me a little bit of trouble. So lift the bumper up a little bit, and there you go. And then you do the same for the rest of the spots. Just get them started. Now, as I mentioned, you've got the teardrops. These are a little bit more difficult, so you're going to want 1 teardrop, 1 washer, and 1 nut. And I'm going to try my best to show you guys how this works. as it is getting a little bit dark out, but hopefully this will give you some indication. So what you're gonna do is take teardrop this way, and you're gonna want to slide it up from back behind the bumper through the opening and get it into place right here. Try not to drop it as it is a little difficult. So we got that. You'll get your washer over the top, and then you get your nut. And you're gonna do the same thing on each side, and then you're able to tighten it down, and then you're pretty much good to go. This thing is secure on the truck at that point. Okay guys, so once you have all those pieces in, the next step is gonna be to actually lift the bumper up a little bit. Because if you look very closely, it might be hard to see, but there's a gap between where the bolt is. There's a bit, this has the ability to slide. So if you look up below the headlight and the body line, there's a gap. So as I lift this thing up, it's gonna help close that gap and make it look a little better. So, as you can see, there you go. So here's your difference. So you're gonna want to lift it up a little bit and tighten it. Then you also have to leave it a little bit loose so that you can tighten the other side. So what I do is lift it, and I would just tighten down one of them so you can lift up the other side. That way it's not too stuck. You can lift up the other side. Once you do that, you can come back to the first side, loosen it up a little bit, and then you can make sure that it's up really as far as you want it to go. That way you're not having these weird gaps, basically. Okay guys, so now that that's done, the very last steps you have to take to finish this thing up is you have to actually put the light bars into place using those sort of L brackets that they give you. And then after that, you have to put the front cover on, and your very last step will be to add these two little square inserts with your parking sensors. And then after that, you just have to connect all your wires, and you're pretty much good to go with this thing. I'm going to show you guys how to get these in along with the light bars. Just a warning, I thought that when I did this the first time, this was by far the hardest step. So just take your time with it. You have to work to get some bolts into some pretty tight spaces, because what this does, and I'll show you right now, is there's a little bracket here, and this goes essentially like this. Now you have to work a little to get it in there, and then there's two bolts with nuts that go up here, and then one goes here. So this one's kind of easy to get to, but the other two you might have to reach around or whatever to get to them, and then you have to actually get the light bars in, which is another monster in itself. But for the most part, this is what I would say is the hardest step, but it's manageable as long as you take your time and don't get too frustrated. Okay, so now we have both L brackets in place. They go, the bottom piece is like this way, up and then over. So if you can see, that's the orientation, and that's the orientation for that guy. One bolt down on the bottom right here, and then two up top, and these use nuts. So I left them loose for now, because now I'm going to work on actually getting the bars into place. I think it's easier to put them bar into place if you have a little bit of play with these left to right. That way if you need to move it, it'll work better for you, and then you can tighten it all up at the end. Okay, so here is everything pretty much kind of wired up. You can see a little bit of the back of it. This is actually the wiring harness for the parking sensors, but once you get your bars in here, you tighten them up on the side. Then this front plate will go over the top of everything and kind of close it all up. So when you're putting these on, you have to pay attention to how far you actually set the bars out, because they are adjustable in terms of how far out they can be set. So I have mine set, as you can see, there's a little bit of space, and the bottom can come out a little bit further because it's on a downward slope. But that's how you actually set those two. Those are probably the trickiest. What I would recommend, do the bottom one first, then do the top one, because
It gives you a little bit more room to get up in here. Also do the bottom one, then tighten down those 3 bolts from earlier, because that will allow you to have the distance set side to side, because 1 bar will already be in, and then you can do the top bar and tighten everything down. Then after that, it's pretty much just plugging stuff in. I'm gonna get the front piece on and I'll show you guys what it looks like all wrapped up. So before you can put the front insert in, what you should do is you should prep these 2 little sensor inserts that go on the front of the front insert. So as you can see, you have to install those little guys that you used on the other inserts in order to hold this in, and they go on the back side. Those are probably some of the most difficult ones to install. Then you install your parking sensor housing. So just like this, line it up as best you can. Like I said, I don't know if these holes truly match up that well. Then you want to get it through. Get a little bit of force, but be careful. It's our plastic. There we go. It's in, clipped in nice. It's all locked in there. Then you can take your actual parking sensor and install that. So the last step before you can actually put the front insert onto the bumper is you need to prep these little parking sensor inserts. So as you had to do for the front inserts where the fog lights and cubes are, is you have to install those little square things. These are probably some of the toughest ones just because there's not much room for your fingers to work. After you do that, then you're going to want to install the actual parking sensors. These cutouts aren't exactly that accurate, so you kind of just have to go with it. I'm not sure why they don't have the lines exactly perfect, but it's alright. I mean, they still go in and they're fairly secure. So after you put that in, then you can put your actual parking sensor in. Make sure it's pretty level so you can easily get your clip on. And then after you've got that done, then what you're able to do is actually put this here and get to work on screwing it in. So let's see how this goes. There's one, and then the second guy. And this is how I did all of the other ones too. Just on like torque setting number 1. I've never had a problem with them loosening up. And then as you can see, that's that. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. And then all we're gonna do is put it up to the front, bolt it up, plug in the last 2 connections for the parking sensors, and then that's pretty much it. We're good to go. Reinstall the grill, and that'll be it. Alright guys, so here's everything actually installed on the truck. The bumper's bolted up, all the inserts are done, everything is wired together, all the parking sensors are tied in. I'll make another video detailing pretty much everything I've done to this truck, where I can go into more detail about how I did the wiring and such. But hopefully this video can help a little bit, because like I said, I wasn't too crazy about the instruction manual that's provided. I think the bumper is an awesome bumper, that's for sure, but they could have done a little bit of a better job. So hopefully this can help someone. If there was something that you wanted me to go into more detail about that I didn't cover that well, please feel free to comment, or comment any questions. I'll be happy to try and help answer them. Like I said, I'm going to try and make another video in the daylight that'll go into better detail about this bumper itself rather than the installation of it. But real fast, I'll show you guys how the lights look. The lights that have the fog light cover on them, if you want to call it that, I actually tied in to my factory fog light on off switch with my headlights, and then everything else is on separate switches. So I'll turn them on real fast for you guys. So here, like I said, in order to turn on my yellow fog lights, I would actually turn on my normal fog lights, and then down here I have 2 hidden switches that are actually what do the big bars as well as the other cubes. And here is everything on, and these lights are bright. This isn't gonna do a great job. but hopefully I can include a video clip in the next video I make of seeing these actually light up a dark road at night. So hopefully, like I said, this helps you guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment them and I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching.